Welcome, welcome. Can we join in song, please? We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like a never-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring up good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like a never-flowing stream. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can feel those of your needs that you won't let show. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Feels good to sing that song together, doesn't it? Welcome, welcome. Do you know where you are? Do you know where you are? You are on land, beautiful land, recently acquired by the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta. Or perhaps you are joining us from home, and we are glad you are. This is also land that was originally cultivated and inhabited by Muskogee Creek indigenous Americans. You are in a community that is emerging, growing, transforming lives through courageous action and soulful connection. Maybe you too are emerging from a cocoon of isolation these last couple of years, emerging from cocoon of illness or of grief. I want you to know right now you are surrounded by people who have faith in you, in your emergence into someone maybe a little more empathetic, a little more generous, a little more courageous. And even as you are invited into this imperfect, emerging community as your imperfect, emerging self, we want you to know you are loved just as you are today. When you are struggling, when you are triumphant, when you are afraid, when you are glorious, you are loved, and you are home. Welcome home. I'm Reverend Terrence Strauss, senior minister here. Sure, let's clap, let's do it. I am thrilled also to welcome leading worship with me, our sabbatical music director, Leroy Kennedy, our fabulous accompanist, Willie Sullivan, and our wonderful soloist, Sarah Dawn Peck. And I am happy to invite to the chancel now our liturgist today, Kate Sweeney, who will join us in chalice lighting. And I just realized we didn't light our little candle so that we could light our big candle.
It's sort of like the put on your own mask first.
Yeah.
Please join in the chalice lighting words with me. May the light of this flame illuminate
Our tradition of
seeking, invite all who yearn for acceptance, and ignite our passion for justice and peace.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever get in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. We find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, and I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. We find out what we're made of when we are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, and I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. You'll always have my shoulder when you cry. I'll never let go, never say goodbye. You know you can count on me like 1, 2, 3, and I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, you can count on me 'cause I can count on you.
Yeah. Nice.
Won't you please rise in body or in spirit, wherever you are, and join us in this morning's movement prayer. First, we bow to honor the Spirit of life. We lift our arms and embrace the gifts of Spirit. We bring these gifts unto ourselves with gratitude and breathe and smile. We share the gifts of Spirit with the world. We remember to be present, honor, embrace with gratitude. Share. Be present. Amen. Now, if you are going to a nursery or pre-K or childcare room, or maybe you are want to be a helper in one of those rooms, feel free to head that way now, out these doors. And if you are staying here, you may grab something from the Wonder Wall. We have a bunch of fidgets to play with, and anybody can go to the Wonder Wall. And now, why don't you take a moment to turn and greet your neighbor and welcome them into this beautiful space this morning.
of justice, whose holy thrones wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Let us put hands upon hearts. Feel the heartbeat, connection to life. Say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love can heal the world. At this time, we hear the joys and sorrows of this congregation. I want you to know today, Sakai Stringer is being treated at Emory Decatur Hospital for congestive heart failure. Her recovery is complicated, but is progressing, and she will hopefully be home in a few days. Sakai and Tony request no phone calls, no emails, or visits while she is undergoing treatment, but would love to receive your cards of support and encouragement, and everyone's thoughts and prayers for Sakai's healing. Carol Galanti is preparing for her third round of chemotherapy for brain cancer at this time. In mid-September. She is now at William Bremen Jewish Home Rehab. The joy is she continues to improve. The concern is that progress with rebuilding physical strength is slow. She is not yet strong enough to stand or walk. Carol would welcome friends to join her and help with exercises and to sing with her. You may reach out to her husband, Bill Porter, if you would like to help. You are invited to say the names of people you are holding in your heart this morning. Someone who is struggling, who could use some extra loving energy coming their way. Please speak their names out loud into this holy space now. May all beings find connection. May all people find comfort. May all of us find more ways to love. Spirit of life, love eternal, we rest in holy gratitude. We surrender to a mystery beyond ourselves. We ask forgiveness for our mistakes, those times we have been selfish or thoughtless. Breathing in and out, we offer grace. We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love. We breathe in, honoring our earth that supports and sustains all life. We breathe out, opening our hearts to wonder and feel a deep connection with all beings. Let us calm our bodies and our minds. We breathe in peace and we exhale. We relax into this space that our intentions make sacred. We enter into the silence.
As a child, growing up Unitarian Universalist in Pittsburgh, I'll be straight with you. I experienced confusion. The subject of church would come up with other kids on the playground, and they would invariably say, "Unitarian, what's that? What do you believe?" These kids, and later on, people like the father of my freshman year roommate on move-in day, would ask me this question, and when they did, they were not talking about principles like the inherent worth and dignity of all people, the pursuit of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, or the interdependent web of life. They were talking about God, about heaven. My roommate's father was definitely talking about Jesus and salvation, in his case to determine if I was A, a suitable roommate for his daughter, or B, not. All through that time, I did not have the language or clear understanding to explain that Unitarian Universalism is a faith centered on shared principles to help guide us through this life, and that it doesn't dictate our beliefs about the divine. And so, in church, I might sit next to someone with completely different views about what happens when you die, and yet we can and do share a religious community. In other words, we need not think alike to love alike, which goes much larger. Yeah, right? I feel like applauding every time I hear that. It goes much larger than Sunday mornings, right? An example, the other day, and he's given me permission to tell this story, but our 7-year-old came home a little bit worried. Okay, a lot worried. There's a friend that he was close with all last year on the playground, and that day his friend made this declaration: that he loves animals above all things, and that anyone who didn't could not be his friend. It made my child panic a little. He liked animals, sure, but I mean, let's be honest, they're not trucks or trains. If he told the truth about his tastes, would he lose his friend? And of course, any parent could say, you can like different things and still be friends. But it was UUCA that gave me the inspiration, the understanding, and the language to take it deeper. In fits and starts, this ongoing, if fragmented, conversation with my son has touched on the fact that even we, his parents, disagree with friends, family, and even each other at times, and sometimes strongly about many things, including politics and religious beliefs. It can be a challenge, but those differences do not threaten our love for one another. This deep dive into Unitarian Universalist belief is a way of telling him, you do not need to believe in everything we believe in to be secure in this family. But it's also modeling a challenging way of being in the world that I believe is critical now, when fractures among us as a people are actively tearing at our democracy. And hey, I mean, we are far from perfect in modeling this as parents. We make mistakes. But it's this place, it's this congregation that brings us back to what is possible. And maybe that's true for you too. Renewing your faith that we can, yes, we can make this world a better place by partnering across beliefs and differences. In fact, I believe that we must. Let's start here and see how this feels. You do not need to think or believe exactly like anyone standing up here in order to be a beloved part of this congregation. Exactly as you are beloved. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. When the road looks rough ahead and you're miles and miles from your nice warm bed, you just remember what your old pal said. You've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. You got troubles, I got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. We stick together and see it through, 'cause you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. Some other folks might be a little bit smarter than I am, bigger and stronger too, well, maybe. But more of them will never love you the way I do. It's me and you. And as the years go by, our friendship will never die. You're gonna see it's our destiny. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me.
And now, please join me for the dedication of the offering. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we call community, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. Thank you. Lying, thinking last night, how to find my soul a home, where water is not thirsty and bread loaf is not stone. I came up with one thing, and I don't believe I'm wrong, that nobody, but nobody, can make it out here alone.
Do you know about the third place? The third place. There's home, there's work, and there's the third place. I grew up watching Norm, Cliff, Diane, and Sam all meet up at Cheers, a neighborhood pub in Boston, where everybody knows your name. I remember watching those Ice Cube movies centered around how the barber shop was most definitely the third place. I have a friend who says he always looks for the barber shop in every town before he could ever even think about living there. Even though he's completely bald, he needs to know there is a third place that will take him in. In the pandemic, we immediately lost our third place. Heck, most of us lost our second place, too, and became real intimate with our first place, our home. The world closed in, and there we were with our thoughts and our fears and our work obligations and our friendships and our piles of dishes and our mouths to feed and our news feed and our anxieties all laid bare in front of us, unavoidable within those four walls. You remember that, right? Even if you were living with a partner or roommate or beloved pet, it was a lonely, lonely time. Some days, I don't know how we made it through. But then I think I know exactly how we survived the strange isolation of those months that became years. How many of you can raise your hands or say it in the chat, how many of you found ways to reconnect with old friends across distance using Zoom? It was nothing short of a miracle how quickly the older generation at UUCA got with it. I mean, how so many folks, yes, applaud yourselves. So many folks who were raised and educated without this level of technology just faced that need to connect and learned to use Zoom, expert level. Meanwhile, many also rediscovered the beauty of the long-distance call. I established new rituals with old friends, monthly meetings with 8 of my closest friends who have all spread out across the globe. We reconnected often enough to become reacquainted with the daily dramas of each other's lives. And I heard of some congregants, some of you, who scheduled check-in calls with just one person a few times a week. And for the first few months, I don't know if you remember this, the lay ministers and other congregant leaders made calls to hundreds and hundreds of people on our lists, making sure everyone felt a connection in those early days of pandemic. Now, the term buddy system, have you heard of it? Was initially coined as a military term, defining that experience when at least 2 people work together as a single unit to be able to help and monitor one another. It's a procedure used in many situations, deemed considerably more dangerous for one person to do alone. All branches of the military use the buddy system in one form or another. And then there's scouts, schools, plenty of organizations, missionaries frequently engage in some sort of form of the buddy system. I'm also thinking about how when you see Mormon kids on their bikes going door to door, they use the buddy system. And you have used the buddy system before. Remember when you were on a class field trip, when you returned to the bus and your buddy wasn't there, it was your responsibility to check up on them. We use this also when we go to protests, Washington, D.C., or at the Capitol. This buddy system reminds us that people can have different life journeys and still be responsible to and for each other. We must bring each other along, and that is more vital now than it ever has been. As we navigate uncharted territory, doing the spiritual work within ourselves, amongst each other, and beyond our walls, we must address the chasm of ideology and belief that marks this era of the 2020s. The buddy system applies not only to the life raft we throw to each other during our time of greatest struggle, but also to those more complicated relationships with those who we might understand as our neighbor. I want to explore the anatomy of a friendship between 2 young men that is kind of a roadmap for navigating some of the hardest territory of our time. You may have heard this story documented well on Krista Tippett's On Being podcast or on some other news programs a couple of years ago. Derek Black was a young man who grew up the heir apparent of a leading white nationalist family. David Duke was his godfather. His father launched the Stormfront, what do you call that website or newsletter? Matthew Stevenson, meanwhile, one of the only Orthodox Jews on this Florida college campus where they both attended at New College, decided after Derek's ideology was outed on campus to great condemnation, well, Matthew decided to invite him to Shabbat dinner for 2 years. See, Derek lived downstairs from Matthew, and sometimes Matthew would sing along when Derek played country and western songs on his guitar. But nevertheless, when the news broke on campus about Derek's ideology and his family connections to white supremacy, Matthew noticed many people on campus began treating Derek very poorly, trying to make his life as miserable as possible, and what he thinks was an attempt to change the situation. Meanwhile, Matthew had been hosting these Shabbat dinners in his dorm, his little apartment, every Friday night, along with his good friend, Moshe Ash. They spoke about it, and they decided here was an opportunity. They knew that Derek had grown up in a white nationalist family, among white nationalist royalty, so to speak, and they felt that he probably did not personally know any people from the backgrounds that his ideology despised. And so for that reason, Matthew and Moshe invited Derek to come over for Shabbat dinner. The first time that Derek was invited over, Matthew was very explicit that with all the people at his dinner that this was not ambush Derek time. This was not some opportunity to yell at him for the wrongness of his beliefs, because Matthew knew Derek had spent his whole life defending his ideology. Matthew had not spent his whole life attacking the statistics and other things that they build their ideological convictions on, and so he knew that shouting at him would just immediately put him on the defensive, and he would never come back. So he was explicit that people were not to discuss his background at the table, or the white nationalism more generally. Now Derek admitted that he was less worried about being grilled than he was about what actually happened, which is that he simply ended up spending years of really enjoyable time among people who the fact that he was friends with them was just contradictory to his entire worldview. And that was a lot more uncomfortable than if he had been grilled, because he had a background doing media interviews since he was 12 years old, where people would say to him, sometimes on camera, "How do you believe in hate?" And he came with crime statistics and IQ statistics and a history of American white supremacist statements from the founding fathers to back up his arguments. And he was pretty comfortable with that position. He thought it was important. He knew how to do it, and if it had been a big argument, well, he would have arrived that day with his arsenal of statistics. He would have misused social science, and no one would have been changed at all. But instead, they would have been further planted in their separate ideologies. Instead, the very real thing that he feared did come to pass. It was simply that Derek was just at a Shabbat dinner for 2 years. And eventually, he had to say to himself, well, I think my beliefs are very anti-Semitic. And I do like this dinner. And I do love these people. So after 2 years of Shabbat dinners, Derek Black published a public letter denouncing the white nationalist ideology, which alienated him from his family of origin and the friends he had known his whole life. And he wrote an article about it for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Derek credits not only the weekly Shabbat dinners and the relationships he formed there, but also the outrage, the public condemnation that led him to attend the dinners in the first place. See, this is important. It's really a problem if the story gets told as just a piece of evidence that the only way you change people's minds is by having friendly conversations with them. But that's not really the whole truth. It is essential that you speak up loudly. This is what Derek says now. It is essential that you speak up loudly and you do condemn a belief that is wrong, publicly, fiercely. That is what happened at New College in Florida. The context for those Shabbat dinners, for those conversations, was an entire community of people who Derek had respected, people who had known him before they knew about his background. Well, they had all clearly come to an intelligent conclusion that what he was advocating for was morally and factually wrong. And that gave him a lot of pause. That made him wonder if perhaps he was wrong. And so Derek contends that both the public outrage and the intimate relationship building were both essential. And I keep returning to Matthew, who hosted these Shabbat dinners. I mean, how could he invite Derek over to his home, to his sanctuary? Matthew makes the point that even an ideology which is as reprehensible as it was to him, as it probably is to every one of us in this room, as we all believe white nationalism to be, once you cross that line saying he's forfeited his rights as a human being, he's forfeited his right to human dignity by virtue of having those beliefs, Matthew thinks, well, maybe the Nazis said that the Jews forfeited their rights to human dignity by virtue of being Jews. Where does it end? So, be strong, yes. Be clear in your convictions, no question. Be public about it. But there is a difference between being strong and violating the humanity of another person. And so both Derek and Matthew are clear that it is both the public outrage and condemnation that is necessary, coupled with the more intimate outreach and long-term engagement. The buddy system. Now, much about this story might seem unique or impossible even, but I stake my faith on stories like this one. I see this story of Derek and Matthew not as idyllic or idealist, but as strategic. Through relationship, all things are possible. Through relationship, all things are possible. Do you believe it? Now, I was raised a Girl Scout, and I remember, leave no one behind. And I think this is how the world transforms into a more peaceful, equitable place, both out in the public square and at the dinner table. And on this Labor Day weekend, I would like to lift up one other part of this story, which is about the container of Shabbat. Shabbat is where these conversations, this dialogue, and this relationship flourished. Shabbat, a full day of rest. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who wrote extensively about the practice of Shabbat, believed the higher goal of spiritual living is not to amass a wealth of information, but to face sacred moments. In a religious experience, for example, it is not a thing that imposes itself on us humans. It is a spiritual presence we can become aware of, we can attune to. What is retained in the soul is the moment of insight. A moment of insight is a fortune, transporting us beyond the confines of measured time. The dinner table. The dinner table is a place where we can face a sacred moment and come away with that moment of insight. With no specific goal in mind, Matthew Stevenson invited Derek Black to Shabbat dinner. And with no specific goal in mind, Derek Black showed up to dinner. I imagine there were candles. I imagine there was home cooking. I imagine there was wine at the table and long, languishing discussions of religion and ideas that led to emotional connection until they could no longer maintain that it was better to be right than to be liked by their neighbor. It was the time out of time, not tending to work or schoolwork, but to relationship. That's what gave them the insight needed to realize that it was better to be liked and to like yourself than to be right. Tending to our relationships, the ones that challenge us, the ones that keep us connected to another world, another perspective. Those relationships bring out a side in us like nobody else. And Labor Day is about seeing the human in front of you as you are, as truly human, just as you are. I mean, really, it's about the corporate leaders seeing the people who work for them as truly human as they are. But I think we can extend that to everyone's humanity. So on this Labor Day, as teachers are under attack and expected to endure worsening job conditions, as fascism lurks ever closer to our most central political systems, as civil rights remain under constant attack everywhere, leaving entire cities without potable water in Mississippi, come on. We've got to remember the buddy system. Leave no one behind. I think UUCA can be your third place. I think that UUCA can be your dining room table. This can be the place, and these can be the people with whom you practice Sabbath, where you face sacred moments, remembering that truth that sets us all free, that nobody can make it out here alone, and nobody has to.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free.
Now, before he runs off stage, we're going to be honoring him in a couple different ways, but I just really want to thank Leroy Kennedy for being with us. The truth is, I think Leroy has brought something to this congregation that we're going to be processing for a very long time. I think we don't even know yet all the ways that you have changed and transformed us. So thank you. And for you all, I want to remind you to take time out of time, not to tend to your work, but to tend to your relationships. And make this your third place, that place where you face sacred moments. Make some time to seek a moment of insight in the relationships you build here and out there. This is how we honor the spirit within, among, and beyond ourselves. Go in blessing as you go and bless others on your way.
We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Come on, real big. Peace and freedom, it's our pride. Peace and freedom. world.